The moving on mindset. Hi guys, my name is Christine. I'm a dating, relationship and personal development coach. And today I'm talking about the moving on mindset. So basically, there comes a point when you have to move on from someone, especially if this someone isn't reciprocating any feelings towards you, and you've been trying and trying, you've been messaging and messaging, you've been doing basically all you can to get them to be attracted to you, and it's not working. So the only kind of option then you have is to move on. And it also might be to do with like an ex. So for example, you might come to the conclusion that, wow, this person really is never coming back. I'm never going to get my ex back. They're not attracted to me anymore. They've moved on. So you have to also move on as well. So you've come to that crossroads in your life where it's time to move on from that past relationship, from that crush. So let's talk about the right mindset, the best mindset to be able to do this effectively, because I feel like some people, they decide that they're going to move on, but they kind of still have that inner resentment towards what's happened, or they still hope that by moving on they'll be able to reattract them. So they're kind of using the mindset of moving on as a manipulation technique in order to reattract someone. So in order to have the moving on mindset, you really do need to have actually moved on. So how can we do this? And that gets me into my first point, which is to get a handle on your emotions. So this means essentially to become a lot tougher. So essentially the moving on mindset is having a tougher mindset. It's becoming more inner resilient, right? So how do we do this? How can we become more internally tougher and have that inner resilience? A lot of it has to do with our internal dialogue, like the way that we speak to ourselves, you know, how our inner like chatter. Now, I used to be someone who had a really, really negative mindset. And I would have like this really bad self-talk, this kind of like hate talk towards myself, which was really, really toxic, and it didn't do very good things to my health. It didn't do very good things to my personality. It didn't do very good things to just me in general overall. So what kind of changed my life a little bit was learning to ask questions to myself, and basically questioning my own thoughts, my own inner chatter. So when I became upset about something, whether this was to do with romance or some other area of my life, I would ask myself questions like, well, what else does this mean? Or is that true? So if I, let's say, came up with like the inner thing of like, oh, the reason why this girl doesn't like me is because I'm ugly, right? Then I would then ask myself, is that true? Or what else could this mean? So by asking yourself that and coming up with a bunch of different answers, basically what you'll see is that these kinds of things, this kind of like reaction that you have inside your head is rarely the truth, especially if it's like a first response kind of reaction, like, oh, the reason why this person doesn't like me is because I'm ugly. That's not true. That's not necessarily true. I mean, for me, like I personally think I'm around average looking, right? So basically I'm not a supermodel and I'm also not Quasimodo. So it's really stupid of me to actually think, oh, it's because I'm ugly, it's because I'm hideous, because that's not true. Like, yeah, I mean, there might be some people, you might be watching this and you might think that I'm hideous, that's fine, because we all have preferences, but I haven't been considered hideous to everybody, right? So that's kind of like the kind of thinking you need to have, like, okay, so there's these horrible emotions inside of me. I'm saying all these horrible things to myself, but is it true? Like, is it really, really true? And once you start questioning your own beliefs, when you start questioning those kind of negative thoughts, you start getting a little bit more tougher. And because of that, your emotions become less intense. You become less emotional, because that's the point here, right? If you want to move on, you need to be less emotional about this situation. So in order for you to do that, you need to make the situation less intense. And the best way you can do that is by questioning your thoughts, by figuring out, wait, is this accurate? Is this true? Obviously, another great way to become more emotionally tougher in not just from your relationships, but overall, is to discipline yourself a bit more. So obviously this is a great way that you can actually become way more tougher in general, and usually if you become tougher in one area of your life, if you become disciplined in one area of your life, it starts to spread into other areas as well. It's like if you become really confident or competent at something. If you're really, really good, let's say you're a really, really good athlete, let's say you're like one of the best in like your community at a certain kind of sport, then because of that, you'll get this confidence. You'll have this air of confidence about you in that area. And because you're confident in that area, it's much more likely that you'll become confident in other areas as well. Because you're really good at something, because you feel like you're really good at something, when you start talking to people, you'll come across as more confident because you already feel competent in at least one area. You're already, like, let's say, like an expert at something. And when you have that range of knowledge, or you have that ability, that physical ability, if it is a sport thing, then you're going to feel much more confident in other areas as well. Like, these things spread into other areas. So decide, what can you become really good at, or what can you be more disciplined at? So this might be like just becoming more disciplined with exercise. It could be working out more often, or it could be something to do with, you know, something more creative. Like, it could be to do with painting, or it could be to do with some other kind of hobby that you may have. You might be really good at sales, or it could be like, yeah, it could be something to do with your career. Like, you could be really good at talking to people on the phone. You could be a really good, confident communicator. So what can you do? What can you do to get better? What areas do you want to improve? And then start making those daily little disciplines in order to be more better at those areas. And when you become more better at those areas that you really want to grow in, that's when you start gaining more confidence. That's when you start becoming more tougher. And that's when things like relationships start to matter less and less. Now, of course, they're important. Of course, that when you do get into a relationship, that is obviously a really important relationship that you need to cultivate. But you become less attached when you're in those dating stages to the people that you're dating, because you have other areas of your life that you're really good at, that you find a lot of meaning in. So, you have to kind of put relationships on a bit of a back burner and put other areas at more of the forefront of your life, more of your hobbies, more of the things that, to do with your career, or to do with your health, or to do with your friendships. Put them at more higher importance. And then you'll become less emotional when it comes to the romantic side of your life while you're still single. And because you have that less attached approach, you'll be able to remain level-headed and cool around the people that you like and the people that you previously liked, and perhaps even your exes. So you'll be a lot more level-headed, and you'll become more attractive to them because you are less attached. Another important thing about the moving on mindset is you need to learn from what's happened, or you'll be doomed to repeat it. And that's really important to know. So in order to move on from a situation, you really do need to learn from it, okay? So this was something that I did when I was a teenager, especially when I was at school and when I was at college. Like, I kept on telling girls that I liked that I was in love with them. And lo and behold, because I just went from 0 to 100 all the time, hiding my feelings basically for so long, and then at some point I just had to tell them that I was in love with them, it always ruined my chances. Like, it never worked. It never worked for me to tell people that I was in love with them. So I realized at some point, this approach isn't really working, right? I realized after, 3 failed attempts at doing something like that, I realized that this doesn't work. This is a really bad way to go about it. And therefore, I learned my lesson. It took me a few times. Obviously, it took me 3 times to learn that lesson, but I still learned it. And if you don't learn that lesson, if you don't realize, what I've been doing hasn't been working, the way that I've been trying to attract people hasn't been working, that's when you realize that you need to change your approach. If you are trying to attract the right partner into your life, then please go and check out this video on how to attract the right partner. If you're appreciating the video so far, please leave a like, and please do subscribe if you haven't done so already. And if there's something you'd like me to discuss in a future video, then please leave it down in the comments. Or if you have any tips and advice yourself, thank you so much. So another thing that you need to do is you kind of need to get control over your habits, especially when it comes to the things that you're doing in terms of your relationships and your love life. So if you're always looking at your crush's profiles on social media, if you're always listening to songs that remind you of your crushes or your past exes, and you can't move on from it, basically what this does is it puts you in a state where you can't move on from the relationship because you keep on reminding yourself of it. You keep on going and searching them up on social media. You keep on listening to the love songs. This was what kept me into, the same kind of situation so long when I was in this kind of place, right? This kind of headspace. I would always be looking my crushes up on social media, seeing what they're doing. I'll be listening to songs about them, crying about them, dwelling about them, all that kind of stuff. But when I stopped doing that, and again, those things became less intense. Like, I didn't care as much. I had the moving on mindset a lot better. Like, it was so much easier for me to move away, for me to move on from those people, because I stopped doing those little habits that kept you stuck in place. Because that's what it does. when you keep on dwelling about them, when you keep on listening to songs about them, looking at their photos, it keeps you stuck there. It keeps you stuck in those old emotions, those old feelings. But when you stop doing that and you replace those habits with other things, so let's say instead of your social media time, you know, let's say you have like some time you spend on social media each day, just replace it with something else. Replace it with like reading a book or going for a run, or if it's something you do on your lunchtime, instead of looking at your phone, you know, talk to your co-workers or the people that you have lunch with if you're someone who goes to school. So you need to get rid of those kinds of habits and replace them with something a lot more better, so you don't dwell on your emotions. And it's all, of course, it's really important, really important to replace those things with things that actually bring you meaning, which actually inspires you, which actually is good for you, that you actually do care about. Because if you care about your relationships, if you care about your crushes, if you care about your exes and looking at, well, basically all these habits, if you care about doing that more than the other thing, then of course you're going to be more attracted to doing those old things anyway. So you need to find things that are actually really meaningful to you, that are more powerful to you, that are more highly more emotional to you than, you know, scrolling through your social media and staring at your ex's photos or your crush's photos. So a really powerful tool to help you move on is to actually kind of get it out of your system. So obviously if you're going through something like a breakup or a crush has rejected you, something like that, then you need to really kind of feel your emotions, because you have to feel it to heal it, basically. And there's no point you trying to move on when you still have all this kind of energy inside of you that you need to get out. So one of the best ways to do it, one of my favorite ways to get rid of these kinds of emotions, is to just write it down. Now, don't write it down with the intention of sending it to your crush or your ex. Don't just write it down for you. Just write down what you're feeling, how much it sucks. Don't write it without the intention of someone else reading it. Write it purely for yourself, because you can easily get rid of it if you're worried about, you know, your parents finding it, if you still live with your parents, or someone else finding it. You know, you can always burn it, you can always throw it down the toilet, whatever, throw it in the bin, whatever you want to do, right? So just write it all down, write how you're feeling, write down all your emotions and this kind of anger that you're feeling, and then just throw it away. You don't have to tell anybody, you don't have to make any declarations, you don't have to tell your best friend, you don't have to tell your crush. All you need to do is just write it down for you. Now, you may want to keep it, but you might also want to throw it away, because it might be something quite cathartic to do, to just throw it away or burn it or something. But write down all your emotions and get rid of it. And that will help you get rid of those emotions. And this may take a few times. Like, for example, you might write it all down, you might feel better for a few days, and then you might start feeling bad again. So you might need to do this process a few times. You might need to do the whole writing it down and throwing it away a few times in order to get over it, in order to really get it out of your system. So I don't think it's just a once and done thing, especially if it's a really high pent emotion, especially if it's something that you've been doing for a long time and you've got basically a lot of emotional charge behind it. So if that's the case, then it may be something you need to do a few times in order to start feeling better about it. So anyway, that's something very practical that you can do to help you get rid of this emotion, so you can start moving on and have that moving on mindset. So thank you so much. I hope you've enjoyed this video on the moving on mindset. If you'd like to get coaching with me, then please go to www.christineloveridge.com. On the shop page of that website, you'll be able to find a free PDF download. It is more for heterosexual males or masculine lesbians, basically anyone who considers themselves to be quite masculine and is attracted to femininity, feminine women, feminine guys, you know, whatever, right? Whatever you like. So if you're attracted to the feminine, then that's the PDF for you. If you do read it and you have any critiques or anything that you'd like me to add, any way to improve it, any way to help people, then please let me know, so I can make it the best product possible for those people that want it. Thank you so much for watching, and I shall talk to you again very soon. Goodbye, guys.